The moment Jimmy Fallon said Jungkook's name, the studio atmosphere changed in a way no cue card could prepare for. It was meant to be casual. A soft laugh followed the question, the kind that usually melts tension instead of creating it. The Tonight Show band had just finished a playful riff. The audience was still smiling. The cameras were steady. Everything was supposed to stay light. "You're invited to Jungkook's wedding, right?" Jimmy asked, leaning back in his chair like it was just another fun detail fans would clip and replay later. But Taehyung didn't smile. For half a second he didn't react at all. Not outwardly, not visibly, but something shifted behind his eyes, something sharp and immediate, like a door slamming shut somewhere deep inside him. The applause that should have followed never came. Instead, silence poured across the studio like cold air. The band stopped playing. The audience sensed it before they understood it. Cameras zoomed in instinctively, trained by years of live television to hunt for moments like this. Taehyung blinked once. The lights suddenly felt brighter, harsher. The studio that had felt warm and playful just moments earlier now felt exposed, like he was sitting alone on a stage much larger than he remembered agreeing to. He hadn't expected that question. Not tonight. Not here. Not with the careful emotional armor he'd put on before stepping out of the dressing room. This interview had been rehearsed. Laugh here, smile there, talk about music, talk about fans, avoid landmines. Jungkook's wedding wasn't on the list. Taehyung's lips parted, then closed again. His jaw tightened just enough for the cameras to catch it. He glanced away from Jimmy, not rudely, not dramatically, but instinctively, like someone trying to grab a thought before it fell apart. His voice came out quieter than expected. He stopped himself, inhaled slowly through his nose. The silence stretched. Jimmy leaned forward slightly now, his expression shifting from playful host to something more human. He knew. Every seasoned interviewer knows the moment they've stepped somewhere they weren't meant to. "We don't have to talk about it if you don't want," Jimmy offered gently. Taehyung looked back up. His smile appeared, but it was the kind fans recognized immediately. The kind that didn't reach his eyes. The kind he used when he was holding something together with effort instead of confidence. "No," he said a little firmer this time. "It's okay." The audience didn't breathe. Taehyung adjusted the cuff of his jacket, a nervous habit he'd never fully grown out of. The movement was small, but familiar to anyone who had watched him long enough. "Yes," he said, "I'm invited." "A beat. But I don't know if I'll go." The studio froze. Jimmy blinked, unsure which part of that sentence landed harder. The words themselves or the hesitation wrapped around them. "You don't know," Jimmy echoed softly, giving space instead of pressure. Taehyung looked down at his hands. They were steady, but only because he was forcing them to be. "Some things," he began slowly, choosing each word with care, "are harder to watch than people think." His voice didn't crack. That almost made it worse. The room stayed quiet, held by something heavier than entertainment. This wasn't a soundbite. This was a confession unfolding in real time. "It's not that I'm not happy for him," Taehyung continued. "I am." He paused, swallowing. I thought I would be part of the ending, not someone sitting in the audience." The lights felt too hot. His vision blurred slightly at the edges, though he refused to let it show. For a moment, he wasn't on an American talk show. He was backstage 2 years earlier after a sold-out concert, the echoes of fans still ringing in the walls. Jungkook had asked him something quietly that night, something no one else heard. "If I get married one day," Jungkook had said, half joking, half serious, "you'll really be there, right?" Taehyung had laughed then. "Only if I'm not the one you're marrying." It was supposed to be a joke. Jungkook hadn't laughed. Now, sitting under studio lights with millions watching, Taehyung realized the joke had come back around, sharper than before. "I'm okay," he said suddenly, looking up again, as if answering a question no one had asked. I'm just surprised. Jimmy nodded, understanding more than he said. We can change the subject. Taehyung tilted his head, that familiar half-smirk appearing just long enough to soften the moment. Only if you have tissues. The audience laughed gently, grateful for the release, but the tension never fully left. That night, the clip went viral within minutes. Fans dissected every frame, every pause, every breath. Headlines spread fast, each one louder than the last. The studio had gone silent and the world had noticed. Behind the scenes, Taehyung stayed in the dressing room longer than usual. His jacket lay untouched on the couch. His phone sat dark in his hand. The first message came from Jungkook's name. He didn't open it. Instead, another notification appeared. Taehyung, you okay? It was from Jimin. Taehyung stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. Not really, but I will be. There was no reply. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. The knock came again, softer this time, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they had the right to interrupt whatever was happening inside the room. Taehyung didn't answer immediately. He stood near the mirror, staring at his own reflection without really seeing it. The makeup lights were still on, too bright, outlining every tired detail in his eyes. He exhaled slowly, then crossed the room and opened the door. Jimin stood there, already half apologizing with his expression. I saw the clip, Jimin said quietly, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. I came as fast as I could. Taehyung nodded once. He didn't trust his voice yet. The room felt smaller with someone else in it, but also safer. Jimin leaned against the wall, watching Taehyung the way only someone who'd known him for years could, without staring, without demanding. You didn't do anything wrong, Jimin said after a moment. You know that, right? Taehyung let out a short laugh that didn't carry any humor. That's never stopped the internet before. Jimin smiled faintly, then glanced at the phone still resting in Taehyung's hand. Did Jungkook text you? Yes. Did you answer? No. Jimin didn't push. He never did. Instead, he crossed the room and sat on the edge of the couch, patting the space beside him. Taehyung hesitated, then joined him, shoulders brushing just slightly. It wasn't supposed to come out like that, Taehyung said finally. I wasn't trying to make it about me. I know, Jimin replied. That's why it hit so hard. Outside the dressing room, producers whispered and assistants hurried past, pretending not to listen. The Tonight Show moved on, but the moment had already detached itself from the broadcast, living a separate life online. Taehyung's phone buzzed again. Another message from Jungkook. Hyung, please talk to me. Taehyung closed his eyes. Jimin watched his face carefully. You don't have to reply tonight. If I don't, Taehyung said softly, it'll get worse. For who? Taehyung didn't answer. Instead, his mind drifted somewhere else entirely. To a practice room years ago, mirrors fogged with breath and exhaustion. Jungkook had been younger then, restless, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall while Taehyung tuned a guitar he barely knew how to play. Do you ever think about normal life? Jungkook had asked out of nowhere. Taehyung had laughed. What's normal? Like Jungkook said, staring at the ceiling, marriage, quiet mornings, nobody watching. Taehyung remembered shrugging. Sounds boring. Jungkook had turned his head then. You don't mean that. Maybe he hadn't. Back in the present, Taehyung unlocked his phone and finally opened the message. Hyung, I didn't know he would ask that, I swear. Are you okay? The words felt sincere. That almost hurt more. Taehyung typed slowly, deleting twice before settling on something safe. I'm fine, the timing just surprised me. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. I never wanted to hurt you. There it was. the sentence that carried more weight than Jungkook probably realized. Taehyung stared at it until the screen dimmed. Jimin leaned closer. What did he say? Taehyung handed him the phone without a word. Jimin read it, then sighed. You're both terrible at this. That earned a real smile, brief but genuine. What are you going to do? Jimin asked. Taehyung leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I don't know. Everyone thinks they're entitled to answers now. As if summoned by the thought, the phone buzzed again. This time it was Jungkook. It was their manager. We need to talk. Tonight, this is getting big. Taehyung's chest tightened. Here it comes. Jimin frowned. Already. It always does. The meeting happened in a quiet hotel conference room an hour later. No cameras, no smiles, just controlled voices and carefully chosen words. This narrative is dangerous, the manager said, folding his hands on the table. Fans are speculating. Media outlets are framing it as conflict. I didn't say anything false, Taehyung replied evenly. No, the manager agreed. But you said something real, that's the problem. Silence filled the room again, different from the studio silence, heavier and more familiar. We need to protect the group, the manager continued. Jungkook's wedding is already sensitive. Your reaction. My reaction was human, Taehyung cut in, his voice calm but firm. The manager hesitated. We're asking you to clarify, a statement, something reassuring. Taehyung looked down at his hands, remembering how steady they'd been on camera. What if I do? He asked. The question wasn't dramatic, it was honest. The manager sighed, then the story writes itself. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, Taehyung stood by the window overlooking the city. Lights stretched endlessly below him, strangers living lives that didn't belong to him. His phone buzzed one more time. This time it was a call. Jungkook. Taehyung let it ring. Then after a long breath he answered. Taehyung, Jungkook said, his voice unsteady. I'm sorry you found out like that. Taehyung closed his eyes. Me too, he replied. Neither of them spoke after that. But for the first time that night, the silence felt like something that could still be crossed. The line stayed open, filled with the quiet sound of breathing on both ends. It wasn't awkward. It was heavier than that. It was the kind of silence that carried years of shared schedules, late-night talks, unspoken promises, and moments neither of them had ever labeled out loud. I didn't plan to tell you this way, Jungkook said finally. I wanted to sit down, just us. Taehyung leaned his forehead against the cold glass of the window. Below him, the city kept moving, unaware that two lives were paused in midair. I know, Taehyung said, that's why it hurts. Jungkook didn't argue. He never did when Taehyung spoke like that. Instead, his voice softened. You've been distant. Taehyung let out a quiet breath. So have you. Another pause. I thought you were busy, Jungkook said. I was protecting myself, Taehyung replied before he could stop himself. The words landed harder than intended. I didn't mean, Taehyung began. No, Jungkook interrupted gently. You did. That honesty cracked something open. Taehyung straightened, moving away from the window. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, phone pressed to his ear like it was the only thing keeping the conversation from disappearing. When did you know? Taehyung asked. Jungkook hesitated. A while. How long is a while? Long enough to be sure. Taehyung nodded even though Jungkook couldn't see it, and long enough not to tell me. I didn't know how, Jungkook admitted. Every time I tried, you were smiling, or laughing, or talking about music like nothing could touch you. Taehyung closed his eyes. That was the version of himself he'd perfected, the one that didn't ask for anything. So you let me find out on TV, Taehyung said quietly. I didn't know he would ask, Jungkook repeated. But I should have prepared you, that part is on me. The honesty made it worse and better at the same time. "What do you want from me?" Taehyung asked. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice sounded smaller. "I want you there." "At the wedding." "In my life," Jungkook said. The words lingered. Taehyung swallowed. "Those aren't the same thing." "I know," Jungkook whispered. They stayed like that for a while, circling something neither of them was brave enough to name directly. Outside Taehyung's room, another phone buzzed. Messages stacked up. Headlines multiplied. Clips replayed his face frame by frame. Fans debated whether his silence meant heartbreak or betrayal or something darker. Inside, none of that mattered. "Do you love her?" Taehyung asked, his voice steady in a way that surprised even him. "Yes," Jungkook said without hesitation. The answer hurt exactly as much as Taehyung had expected. "And she loves you?" "Yes." Taehyung nodded again. "Then that's enough." "But—" "No," Taehyung said softly. "Let me finish." He stood up, packing the room slowly, grounding himself in movement. "I don't regret anything we shared. I just regret that I thought it meant the same thing to both of us." "It did," Jungkook insisted. "Just not in the way you think." Taehyung stopped walking. "That's the problem." Another silence settled in, calmer now. "Resigned." "I'm not angry," Taehyung continued. "I'm just adjusting." "To what?" Jungkook asked. "To being someone you love," Taehyung said, "but not the one you choose." Jungkook's breath hitched audibly. "I never wanted to lose you," he said. "You won't," Taehyung replied, "but it will change." They both knew it already had. When the call ended, Taehyung remained standing in the center of the room, phone still in his hand long after the screen went dark. Minutes later, another call came in. This one was from Namjoon. "Hyung," Namjoon said, skipping pleasantries. "Are you holding up?" Taehyung smiled faintly. "Define holding up." Namjoon sighed. "The company is worried. Media wants a statement. Fans want reassurance. Everyone wants something." "What do you want?" Taehyung asked. "I want you to be okay," Namjoon said. "And I want us not to tear ourselves apart trying to please people." Taehyung sank onto the bed. "Those two things don't always line up." "No," Namjoon agreed, "but we'll figure it out." After the call, Taehyung finally checked social media. He shouldn't have, but he did. Support flooded in. Confusion, too. Some fans defended him fiercely. Others accused him of making Jungkook's happiness about himself. The comments blurred together until they stopped feeling real. He locked the phone and set it face down. For the first time since the studio, Taehyung allowed himself to feel tired. Not dramatic tired, bone-deep tired, the kind that came from holding things in for too long. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, and thought about all the endings he'd imagined that never came true. Somewhere across the city, Jungkook was probably doing the same. And for the first time, Taehyung understood something clearly. This wasn't the end of a friendship. Morning arrived without ceremony. Taehyung woke to the muted glow of the city pressing through the hotel curtains, his phone vibrating softly on the nightstand like it had been awake long before he was. Notifications filled the screen before he even unlocked it. Messages from staff. Missed calls. Headlines rewritten a dozen different ways, each one pulling the same moment apart for clicks. He didn't read them. Instead, he sat up slowly, letting the weight of the night settle into something manageable. The ache was still there, but it no longer felt sharp. It felt inevitable. In the bathroom mirror, his face looked calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that fooled people into thinking nothing had changed. By the time he arrived at the company building, the mood was already tense. Assistants avoided eye contact. Managers spoke in low voices that followed him down the hallway. Everyone knew why he was there. The conference room door closed behind him with a soft click. Across the table sat familiar faces, all wearing expressions that mixed concern with calculation. A tablet slid toward him, already open to a drafted statement. "This clarifies your feelings," one of them said carefully. "It reassures fans, it protects the group." Taehyung scanned the words without really reading them. They were polished, gentle, empty. "I was surprised by the question," the statement read. "I fully support Jungkook and wish him happiness." It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. "You want me to post this?" Taehyung said. "It would help," the manager replied. "The silence is being interpreted." Taehyung leaned back in his chair. He thought of the studio lights, the quiet, the way his honesty had slipped out before he could stop it. "What happens if I do?" he asked. The room hesitated. "Then the narrative keeps growing," someone said, "and we can't control where it goes." Taehyung nodded slowly. "You were never controlling it, you were just delaying it." That ended the discussion faster than any argument could have. An hour later, he left the building without posting anything. Outside, fans had already gathered, phones raised, eyes searching his face for confirmation of whatever version of the story they believed. Taehyung bowed politely, smiled softly, and kept walking. Inside the car, the silence returned. This time it didn't feel like pressure, it felt like space. His phone buzzed again, a message from Jungkook, short and careful. "Did you get some rest?" Taehyung stared at it for a long moment before replying. "A little." Another pause, then. "I'm meeting the family today." Taehyung's fingers tightened around the phone. He imagined the scene easily. Warm conversations, congratulations, futures spoken aloud. That night, Taehyung went to the studio. It wasn't on his schedule. No staff, no producers, just him, the dim lights, and a piano he hadn't touched in months. He sat down slowly, letting his hands rest on the keys without pressing them. Music had always been where he put the things he couldn't say. The first notes came out hesitant, then steadier. A melody formed, quiet and unresolved, looping back on itself like it was searching for an ending that didn't exist. Hours passed without him noticing. Somewhere between the second and third chorus that never became lyrics, Taehyung realized something important. He wasn't writing about Jungkook. He was writing about himself. About the version of him that waited, that assumed closeness meant direction, that mistook shared history for shared futures. When he finally stopped, the room felt lighter. His phone lit up with another notification, this one from Jimin. "You disappeared." Taehyung smiled faintly. "I needed quiet." "You okay now?" Taehyung considered the question carefully before answering. "I'm clearer." That night, lying on the studio couch, Taehyung stared at the ceiling and let the realization settle. He didn't need to explain himself to millions of people who only saw fragments. He needed to decide who he was going to be after this. The silence hadn't broken him. It had finally given him a choice. The silence didn't end when Taehyung left the studio the next morning. It followed him in subtler ways, in the pauses between conversations, in the looks people gave him when they thought he wasn't paying attention. He noticed it during rehearsals later that week. The members were together again, standing in a familiar room that had seen every version of them. Exhausted trainees, global performers, brothers who knew each other's habits better than their own. Music played softly in the background, but no one was really listening to it. They were listening to him. Taehyung felt it before anyone spoke. Jin was the first to break the tension, as he often was. "So," he said lightly, clapping his hands once, "are we rehearsing or just emotionally staring at each other today?" A few chuckles followed. The air loosened just enough. Taehyung smiled in gratitude, both probably. They started with warm-ups, familiar movements, familiar counts. Muscle memory carried him through the first run. But his mind lagged behind. replaying moments he hadn't invited back. During a break, Taehyung sat on the floor, back against the mirror, wiping sweat from his neck. That was when he felt someone sit beside him. Jungkook. They didn't look at each other at first. "I didn't want this to be awkward," Jungkook said quietly. Taehyung nodded. "Neither did I." "But it is," Jungkook added. "Yes," Taehyung agreed, "a little." They sat in that honesty for a moment. It was better than pretending. "I saw you didn't post the statement," Jungkook said. "I couldn't," Taehyung replied. "Not like that." Jungkook's fingers twisted together, a habit Taehyung knew well. "People think it means something else." "It means exactly what it is," Taehyung said. "I wasn't ready to summarize something I haven't finished understanding." Jungkook exhaled slowly. "I don't want you to feel left behind." Taehyung finally looked at him then. Jungkook's eyes were sincere, troubled in a way cameras never captured. "I don't," Taehyung said. "I just need to learn how to walk beside you differently." Jungkook swallowed. "Can you?" Taehyung didn't answer right away. He looked around the room at the others. Namjoon quietly talking with staff, Jimin stretching near the speakers, Hoseok laughing at something Jin said. This was his life. Complicated, loud, shared. "I can," Taehyung said finally, "but not overnight." Jungkook nodded, relief and sadness crossing his face at the same time. "That's fair." Practice resumed, movements sharpened, voices blended. From the outside, nothing looked broken. After rehearsal, Taehyung drove alone. At a red light, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the calm there. Not numb, just steady. That night, an article surfaced claiming Taehyung was distancing himself from the group. Another suggested tension behind the scenes. The comments spiraled predictably. Taehyung read one line that stuck with him. "He looks like someone preparing to leave." He locked his phone and set it aside. Later, he met Namjoon for coffee. No cameras, no staff, just 2 cups cooling between them. "You're handling this quietly," Namjoon said. "I don't trust loud decisions," Taehyung replied. Namjoon smiled. "Good, loud decisions get made for you." They sat in companionable silence, watching people pass outside the window. "You're not leaving," Namjoon said, not as a question. "No," Taehyung said. "I'm just rearranging where I stand." Namjoon nodded, satisfied. That evening, Taehyung received an envelope at his apartment. No return address. Inside was an invitation, simple and elegant. Jungkook's wedding. Taehyung held it for a long time without opening it fully. The weight of the paper felt heavier than it should have. He didn't decide anything that night. Instead, he placed the invitation on the piano, right next to the melody he'd recorded days earlier. 2 unanswered questions sharing the same space. For the first time, Taehyung allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by proximity to someone else's happiness. It scared him, and it felt honest. The invitation stayed where Taehyung left it for days. He passed it every morning on his way to the kitchen, its edges catching the light like it was waiting to be acknowledged. Sometimes he paused, fingers hovering just above the paper, before turning away again. Decisions had a way of demanding more honesty than he felt ready to give. Work continued, because it always did. Schedules filled his calendar. Meetings blurred together. Interviews circled the same careful questions, each one dancing around the moment on late-night television without nomming it directly. Taehyung answered with grace, with restraint, with the practiced calm people expected from him. But alone, the questions were louder. One evening, long after midnight, Taehyung returned to the studio. The room smelled faintly of wood and dust, familiar and grounding. He sat at the piano again, pressing a single key this time, letting the sound linger until it faded naturally. He thought about the first time he and Jungkook had stood on a stage together, about how young they'd been, how the future had felt endless and undefined, something they assumed they walk into side by side. He hadn't been wrong, just incomplete. The melody he'd started earlier grew more confident now, not sad, not angry, resolute, a sound that didn't ask to be chosen. When he finished, Taehyung didn't save the file. He didn't need to. The next day, Namjoon called a group meeting. They gathered in a quiet room, no cameras, no managers hovering too close, just them. The air felt serious but not tense. "I want to talk about boundaries," Namjoon said plainly. "About how we move forward without letting outside narratives define us." No one interrupted. "We don't owe explanations for feelings," Namjoon continued, "but we owe each other honesty." Taehyung met Jungkook's eyes across the room. There was no accusation there, just recognition. "I'm okay," Taehyung said when the room turned to him. "I just need time to recalibrate." Jungkook nodded. "I'll give you that." It was the first time Taehyung believed it. Days later, a message arrived from someone unexpected. It was from Jungkook's fiancée. "Hello, Taehyung. I hope this isn't strange. I just wanted to say I admire you. Jungkook talks about you with a lot of respect. I hope we can talk someday if you're comfortable." Taehyung stared at the message longer than he had at any headline. There was no jealousy in the words, no claim, just kindness. He typed back carefully. "Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your honesty. I'm still finding my footing, but I wish you both happiness." She replied a few minutes later. "Take all the time you need." That night, Taehyung finally opened the invitation completely. The date stared back at him. Sooner than he'd expected. He imagined himself there. The music, the smiles, the photographs that would live forever online. He imagined the ache, too, and realized it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been before. Pain, he was learning, changed shape when you stopped fighting it. A week before the wedding, Taehyung made a decision. Not public, not dramatic. Personal. He texted Jungkook. "I got the invitation, I'm still deciding, but I want you to know I'm proud of you." The reply came almost instantly. "That means more than you know. Thank you for not disappearing." Taehyung set the phone down and exhaled slowly. He hadn't disappeared. He stayed, just not in the same place. For the first time since the studio went silent, Taehyung felt something close to peace.